The world came back to her in fragments. The sound of beeping machines, the antiseptic tang of hospital air, and the faint echo of a woman screaming. Or was that only in her head? Samira opened her eyes to white light. It hurt. Everything did. When she tried to move, a sharp pain sliced through her temple. A nurse's voice floated nearby. "Easy, sweetheart. You've been through a lot. Who am I?" The question escaped before she realized she'd spoken. Her throat burned, her voice unfamiliar to her own ears. No one answered at first. Then she heard a low baritone from the corner of the room. "You're safe now." The man's voice was calm, deep, the kind that could quiet a storm or cause one. When her eyes focused, she saw him. A tall man in a tailored gray suit, face pale against the sterile light. His eyes were the color of winter cold, deliberate, unreadable. He stepped closer, stopping just before her bed. "I'm Charles King." His tone was smooth, but there was something restrained, almost fragile beneath it. "You saved my life." Samira blinked. What? There was an accident. A year ago." His gaze dropped to his hands, as if the words themselves were too heavy. "You were there. You pulled me out of a burning car before it exploded." She tried to remember, but her mind was a snowstorm, white, empty, endless. "I don't remember that. I don't remember anything." "I know." His voice softened, though his posture never changed. "The doctors said it might take time, but until then, you'll need somewhere to stay." There was something about the way he said it, not quite charity, not quite kindness. More like a man offering a solution to a problem he didn't know how to feel about. The next morning, she stood by the window of the hospital room staring at the snow drifting outside. Her reflection looked back at her, a woman she didn't recognize. A nurse entered quietly. "Miss, the gentleman's here again." When Samira turned, Charles was already in the doorway, coat draped over his arm. His expression unreadable, but his presence filled the room like gravity. "I made arrangements," he said simply. "You'll stay at my place for now. It's safer." "Safer," she echoed, uncertain. "There are reporters," he replied, eyes flicking to the window. "You were found near the scene. People have questions. You don't need that right now." She wanted to refuse, but the truth was, she had nowhere to go. No name, no past, no home. The car ride was silent, except for the hum of the city outside. Samira watched the skyline blur through the tinted window. New York in December, all silver glass and exhaust beauty laced with loneliness. Every once in a while, she caught his reflection in the glass. Charles King. The name sounded like it belonged to someone untouchable. The way he carried himself, measured, quiet, powerful, only deepened that impression. When they arrived, she expected some sleek Manhattan penthouse. Instead, his home was a sprawling brownstone near the edge of Central Park, grand, but not ostentatious. A place built for silence, not show. The housekeeper met them at the door, a kind-faced older woman named Ellen. "This must be Miss Samira," she said warmly. "We've been expecting you." Samira looked up. Samira Charles spoke before she could ask. "It was the name written on your hospital bracelet." "Oh," she murmured, touching the tag still looped around her wrist. "So that's me." Her attempt at humor faltered halfway. Ellen's smile dimmed. "You must be exhausted, dear. Come, I'll show you your room." The room was soft, too soft. Cream curtains, a velvet chair, a vase of white lilies that smelled like loss. She sat on the edge of the bed, tracing the embroidered initials on the pillow, AK. From the doorway, Charles's voice came again. "If you need anything, Ellen will take care of it. My office is 2 floors down. You're free to rest." He turned to leave, but she stopped him. "Why are you helping me for the first time?" He hesitated. The silence stretched between them until he said without looking back, "Because once you helped me." And then he was gone. That night, Samira dreamed again the same flashes, fireglass. A man trapped inside a car, her hands trembling as she reached through smoke. Then, darkness. She woke with a gasp. The room was too quiet, the air heavy. Through the faint crack of the door, she saw a shadow in the hallway. Her pulse spiked. "Who's there?" No answer. Then a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." Her breath caught. She stumbled toward the door, yanking it open, only to find the hallway empty. But on the floor lay a single photograph burnt at the edges, as if rescued from fire. In the picture, Charles holding a woman who looked exactly like her. The next morning over breakfast, Samira couldn't keep her eyes off him. He sat at the head of the table reading a newspaper, perfectly composed. Finally, she said, "I found something last night. A photo." He didn't look up. There are hundreds of photos in this house. This one was burned, and the woman, she looked like me. Now he looked up. "Just slightly. That's impossible. Is it?" She pressed her tone soft but sharp. "Because I think you know more about me than you're saying." He folded the paper carefully as though giving himself time. "There's a lot I could tell you, Miss Samira," he said finally, "but none of it will help you heal." "Maybe not," she whispered, "but it might help me remember." For a heartbeat, something broke in his expression, a crack of guilt quickly sealed. Then he stood. "You should rest. We both should." He left before she could respond, but she noticed his hand trembled as he set down his cup. Later that evening, Ellen found Samira sitting alone by the piano in the main hall. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure. Yet, when she pressed down, a melody came unbidden, soft, aching, familiar. From the doorway, Charles froze. That song, the one she used to hum when she thought no one was listening. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, voice low, almost fearful. Samira turned, startled. "I don't know. It just came." He said nothing for a long time. The air between them hummed with things unsaid. Then he simply nodded and walked away, leaving her with a question that refused to fade. What if the heart remembers what the mind forgets? As night deepened, she wandered the hall, drawn to a closed door at the end of the corridor. When she pushed it open, a gust of cold air swept through. The room inside was untouched dust on the dresser, a crib by the window. On the wall hung a framed drawing, a child's scrawl of 3 stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, and Leo. Her vision blurred. Leo. The name felt heavy on her tongue, strangely dear. She didn't know who the boy was, but something in her chest clenched like a wound reopening. Behind her, a voice said quietly, "He's sleeping now." She turned. Charles stood in the doorway, face shadowed. "You shouldn't be in here. Is he your son?" He nodded once. "Mine, and someone else's." Her voice trembled. "Someone who looks like me." The silence that followed was the loudest sound in the house. He met her gaze, and for the briefest second, his eyes betrayed him. Grief, guilt, longing, everything he'd tried to bury. "Yes," he said finally, his voice cracking like glass. "Someone who used to be you." Samira's knees went weak. "What are you saying?" But he only stepped back, retreating into the dark hall. "Good night, Samira." She sank to the floor, trembling. The air smelled faintly of smoke, the same scent from her dreams. In the distance, she heard Leo's faint laughter echo through the house, a sound both strange and heartbreakingly familiar. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what she might remember. She was afraid of what he was trying to make her forget. And somewhere deep in the walls of that house, the truth waited, patient, buried still burning beneath the ash. The King residence was silent, almost reverent, as though time itself refused to enter. Every corner held its breath, every polished surface, every portrait on the wall, every unopened door. Samira stood at the threshold of the grand foyer, her suitcase small against the vast marble floor. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals. Inside, the air felt suspended, like the house was waiting for something or someone to breathe life into it again. Ellen, the housekeeper, smiled softly. "Don't mind the quiet, dear. It's been like this for years." "Years," Samira repeated, "since before Mr. King started traveling." He wasn't the same after the accident. The word accident echoed in Samira's mind like the toll of a distant bell. She wanted to ask more, but Charles appeared at the top of the staircase, and the questions died on her lips. He descended slowly, one hand in his pocket, the other tracing the rail. "Ellen, could you take Leo to the garden for a while?" Ellen hesitated. "He's in the study, sir." Drawing again. Charles's jaw tightened, a flicker of something unreadable. "Then let him be." He turned to Samira. "I'll show you your duties." The tour felt less like an introduction and more like a negotiation. He spoke in measured tones, explaining where things were kept, when dinner was served, what parts of the house were private. His voice was calm, but she noticed how carefully he avoided certain rooms, how his gaze lingered on the closed nursery door. Finally, he stopped at the end of a long hallway, lined with photographs. "Your room is here," he said. Samira paused by one of the frames, a candid shot of Charles holding a small boy. Both were smiling, sunlight in their eyes. "This must be Leo," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "My son, and his mother." He hesitated. "Gone." There was no tremor in his voice, but the pause before the word "gone" carried 1,000 unspoken things. That evening, Samira wandered into the garden alone. The world outside the walls was fading into dusk. The air smelled faintly of rain and cedar. From somewhere nearby came the sound of laughter, a child's light and genuine. When she turned, she saw a small boy running across the grass, curls bouncing, cheeks flushed. He stopped when he saw her. For a second, they just stared at each other. Then he ran straight toward her and wrapped his arms around her leg. "Mama." The word struck her like a pulse of electricity. Charles's voice cut through the air. "Leo." He was striding down the steps, tension rippling through him. He crouched beside the boy, forcing a calm smile. "Leo, she's not." He stopped himself, glancing at Samira. "She's not your mama, son. Just Miss Samira. Remember?" Leo frowned, confusion clouding his wide brown eyes. "But she smells like her." The words made Charles flinch. He lifted the boy gently. "Enough now. Say goodnight." Leo clung tighter to Samira. "Mama sings to me at night." Samira's heart twisted. "I can sing if you'd like," she said softly, instinctively. Charles froze. His grip on Leo's shoulder tightened for just a moment before he loosened it. "Maybe later," he said. "Come inside." But the boy didn't move. He reached up and touched Samira's cheek. "You feel warm," he whispered, as if testing if she were real. She smiled through the ache in her chest. "So do you." Later, as the house settled into its nocturnal rhythm, Samira couldn't sleep. The echoes of the boy's voice lingered in her mind. "Mama sings to me at night." She rose from bed and followed the faint hum of a lullaby drifting through the hall. It led her to Leo's room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the boy slept soundly, one hand clutching a small stuffed bear. The music came from an old music box on the dresser. The melody was hauntingly familiar. Samira sat beside him, humming along without thinking. The tune flowed out of her like breath, soft and instinctive. She didn't know the words, but she knew how they felt. Halfway through, Leo stirred. "Mama," he murmured, still half dreaming. She froze, her throat tight. "Sleep, baby, just sleep." He sighed contentedly, curling closer to the sound of her voice. From the doorway, unseen, Charles watched, shoulders tense, fists clenched. He turned away before she could see him, his expression unraveling in the dark. He found himself in his study, the only place that still felt under his control. The fireplace crackled quietly, casting long shadows across the room. On the mantel sat a photograph, his wife, smiling, holding Leo in her arms. He picked it up, running his thumb over the woman's face. "Samira," he whispered, "you came back. But you're not mine anymore, are you?" He placed the frame down face first. The sound of glass against wood was too loud in the silence. The next morning, Samira joined Ellen in the kitchen. The older woman was stirring oatmeal while humming under her breath. "That song," Samira said suddenly. "What's it called?" Ellen looked up. "Oh, that old thing Leo's mother used to sing it to him every night. Wrote it herself." Samira's hands went cold around the mug she was holding. "Wrote it? Herself?" Ellen nodded. "She had a beautiful voice. You remind me of her, actually." Samira set the mug down, her heart pounding. "What was her name?" Ellen frowned, thinking, "I'm not sure I should. Please." The old woman sighed. Her name was Samira King. The world tilted. For a moment, the kitchen blurred, the air thick as honey. Samira gripped the counter to steady herself. "That can't be right," she said. "My name's Samira Johnson." Ellen gave her a strange look. "Mr. King said you didn't remember much. Maybe some things are just coming back." But Samira barely heard her. The name was echoing inside her skull like a drumbeat. Samira King. Samira King. She left the kitchen in a daze, heading toward the staircase. Every step felt heavier than the last. At the landing, she stopped before the locked door, the one Charles had avoided during their tour. Her hand trembled as she turned the knob. To her surprise, it opened easily. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old wood. A woman's coat still hung by the door. Perfume lingered faintly in the air. It was a room frozen in time. A vanity stood by the window, covered in dust. On it, a jewelry box slightly open, revealing a silver locket. She picked it up and flicked it open. Inside was a photograph, Charles, Leo, and her. Her breath caught. The woman in the picture smiled back at her. Same eyes, same face, same tiny mole near the corner of her lip. Behind her, a voice said quietly, "You shouldn't be here." She turned. Charles stood in the doorway, his face pale, eyes unreadable. "You lied to me," she said. "I protected you." "From what?" "From remembering." She took a step closer, the locket trembling in her hand. "Why? Why would you want me to forget my own life?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because the truth destroyed you once. I couldn't bear to watch it do that again." Silence filled the room, heavy with the ghosts between them. Then, from down the hall, Leo's cry pierced the quiet, sharp, frightened. Samira's instincts overtook thought. She ran. In the nursery, the boy sat up in bed, eyes wet with tears. "I dreamed the fire again," he sobbed. She gathered him into her arms without hesitation, rocking gently. "It's okay. I'm here." He buried his face against her shoulder, breathing in the scent of her skin, calming slowly. Charles appeared at the doorway, watching them in shadow. When Leo's eyes finally fluttered closed, Samira looked up at Charles. "He dreams about it," she whispered. "Every night," he said quietly. "He was there. He saw it all. She brushed the boy's hair back. Then maybe I wasn't the only one who forgot. Hours later, when the house had gone still again, Charles stood outside Samira's door, hand raised as if to knock, but he couldn't. Inside, Samira sat awake, staring at the locket in her palm. Every memory she didn't have now pressed against her chest, like a bruise waiting to bloom. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, "If I was her, why did she have to die?" Through the thin walls, Charles closed his eyes. He'd built his empire on truth and numbers, but this was the one lie he chose to live with. Because if she remembered everything she might remember, why she ran from him that night, and this time, he might not be able to stop her. Outside, the snow kept falling quiet, patient, as if covering not just the ground, but the past itself. The dreams began with water, not gentle waves, but something vast and endless swallowing light. She stood on a beach, salt stinging her lips, wind clawing through her hair. A sudden flash fire over the sea, the roar of an explosion, and two hands reached for each other through the smoke. Hers and someone else's. A man's. Then always came the sound of a child crying. Samira woke, gasping, sweat cold on her skin, her pulse drumming against the silence. The room was dark, except for the faint glow spilling through the half-open door. Down the hall, she heard faint music, a piano hesitant, broken between chords. She followed the sound, barefoot, drawn, as if in a trance. In the study, Charles sat by the window, a glass untouched beside him. The piano behind him still hummed with the echo of his last note. He didn't turn when she entered. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said quietly. "You didn't," she lied. "I couldn't sleep." He glanced at her, then the moonlight cutting across his face, beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. His eyes fell to the photograph on the table beside him. The one in the cracked silver frame, a woman smiling with her arms around a small boy. The same smile she saw sometimes in the mirror, like a ghost's reflection. "Who was she?" Samira asked softly. He traced the fracture in the glass with his thumb. "Someone I once thought I'd lost forever." The words hung between them, too heavy, too close. When he finally met her eyes, she saw something unguarded there, a longing so raw, it frightened her. "Do you believe in fate, Samira?" he asked, his voice roughened by something that wasn't quite hope nor despair. She shook her head. "I don't believe in fate. I believe in feelings. And right now..." She hesitated, searching for the truth inside her chest. "You make me feel safe." The corner of his mouth trembled, not quite a smile. For a moment, the distance between them ceased to exist. In the days that followed, something in the house shifted subtly, like a heartbeat returning after a long sleep. Leo laughed more. Ellen hummed when she cleaned. Even the cold walls seemed less suffocating. Samira began spending her mornings with the boy in the garden, reading or sketching while the sun reached through the trees. She felt drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain: the curve of his laugh, the way he'd press his forehead to hers before running off to chase butterflies. Each time he called her Miss Samira, a strange ache bloomed behind her ribs, as if the title was too formal for what their souls already knew. One afternoon, while tidying Leo's playroom, she found a box beneath the bookshelf filled with drawings. Most were childlike scrawls of cars and suns, but one froze her breath, a woman with long curls holding hands with Leo and Charles. At the bottom corner, written in uneven letters, "Mama Dada May." She stared at it until the world blurred. The next thing she knew, Charles was in the doorway watching. He drew that when he was 3, he said quietly, "Before the fire." Her throat tightened. He remembers her, pieces of her, like shadows. His gaze flicked to the drawing, then to her face. Sometimes he looks at you as if you're the shadow he's been chasing. Maybe we all are, she murmured. That night, Samira dreamt again, but this time the memory came sharper. The same ocean, the same explosion. Only now she saw herself pulling someone from the wreckage. Charles, his body, limp blood down his temple. She remembered screaming his name, even though she shouldn't have known it. Then the world went white. She woke sobbing, clutching her chest. Her heartbeat pounded so violently, she thought it might break her ribs. She stumbled out of bed, down the hallway to his study. He was there again, always there, seated in the dark eyes hollow, as if he'd been waiting for her. "You were in my dream," she said. He looked up, weary. "Was I?" "There was an explosion. On the water. I dragged you out. You were bleeding." Her voice faltered. It felt real. Charles's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Was it?" she asked. He stood and crossed the room in 2 strides. "Dreams aren't always truth, Samira." Her breath shook. "But sometimes they are memories." His silence confirmed more than any answer could. "Why won't you tell me?" she whispered. He stopped inches from her, so close she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Because every time you remember," he said softly, "you bleed." The air between them thrummed. She wanted to reach for him to demand the truth, but his eyes warned her, not yet. The following days passed in uneasy quiet. Samira felt fragments of her past rising like bubbles beneath ice, voices, faces, flashes of color. A song hummed by a child, a hand covered in soot, the faint scent of burnt cedar. One evening, while folding laundry, she found a shirt of Charles's, one she hadn't seen before. The collar was singed, almost imperceptibly. Her hands trembled as she touched the charred edge. She brought it to his office. This was from the accident, wasn't it? He looked up from his laptop, tension sliding into his shoulders. "Where did you find that?" "In the laundry." He reached for it, but she held it back. "Why are you keeping it?" He stared at her, then sighed, the sound of a man who'd run out of lies to hide behind. "Because it's the last thing she touched before the fire." Samira's throat closed. "She or I?" He froze. The word hung like a blade between them. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said, voice breaking. "And you're the only one who does." Charles's composure cracked. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "You think I don't want to tell you. Every night I almost do. But then I see the way you look at me like you could love me again, and I can't risk losing that. Not twice." Her tears fell freely now. "You're keeping me in the dark because you're afraid of losing me." "Yes," he whispered, "because the first time I told you the truth, it nearly killed you." He moved to touch her cheek, but she stepped back. "Then maybe this time," she said, trembling, "it will set me free." That night, neither of them slept. Charles sat alone in his office, staring at the fire that had burned too long. On his desk lay the folder he'd kept locked for years. The police report, the hospital photos, the death certificate stamped with her name, Samira King. Upstairs, Samira sat by the window, her reflection flickering in the glass. The snow outside shimmered under the city glow, endless and quiet. She reached for the locket around her neck, the one she'd found in the locked room, and opened it. Inside was a photo she hadn't noticed before, tucked behind the first one. A torn piece of a newspaper clipping dated the night of the explosion. King Industries CEO, rescued from yacht fire wife. Missing, presumed dead. Her hand flew to her mouth. She whispered into the silence. It wasn't a dream. The next morning, she found Charles in the conservatory, sunlight spilling over his shoulders as he trimmed the roses. "Tell me everything," she said. He didn't turn. "No." "Then I'll find it myself." Her tone had changed, steady, resolute. No longer the lost woman who'd arrived at his door, but someone reclaiming herself. He faced her, then the shears still in his hand. If you go digging, Samira, you'll find things that can't be undone. Maybe they shouldn't be. His gaze softened, pained. You think you want the truth, but the truth isn't kind. It never was. Neither is forgetting, she said quietly. That night, the dreams came again, only clearer. She saw the yacht on fire, heard Leo's scream, felt the heat devouring the air. She saw herself pulling Charles to safety, then turning back for the child, and an explosion tearing the world apart. When she woke, her palms were bleeding where her nails had dug into them. She stumbled toward the window. Outside, the sea was only a memory, but its roar still lived inside her. Downstairs, Charles stood by the piano, staring at the empty music sheets. He heard her footsteps but didn't turn. Did you remember, he asked. Samira's voice was faint. Enough to know you lied to protect me. He exhaled, long and heavy. And will you forgive me? She looked at him for a long time. This man who was both her salvation and her wound. I don't know, she said. But I think I already did, before I even knew why. For the first time, he smiled, small, broken, real. Because love doesn't need memory to exist, only the courage to stay. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, a storm forming over the ocean miles away. And though neither of them could see it yet, that storm was bringing with it the truth and everything it was about to destroy. Rain fell hard that night. New York shimmered beneath it, 1,000 windows flickering like restless eyes. Inside, the King residence, the world was unnervingly still, every light dimmed, every clock ticking louder than it should. Samira sat by the window, tracing raindrops on the glass, her reflection fractured by the storm. She hadn't spoken to Charles since dawn. The silence between them had become a living thing, pacing the halls like a ghost. A knock startled her. Not the soft, polite tap of Ellen's knuckles, this one was sharp, deliberate. When she opened the door, a man stood in the corridor, soaked to the bone. His suit clung to him, his eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat. Mrs. King, he said, his voice low and coarse. Samira's stomach twisted. You have the wrong person. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Do I? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, edges warped from the rain. He didn't tell you, did he? Charles King, the man who calls himself your savior, is the one who broke you. She took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph, she and Charles on a sunlit terrace, wedding rings glinting, their faces radiant with a happiness she couldn't remember. Her knees weakened. Who are you? Someone who watched him destroy what he loved, the man said. You were his wife. You ran from him the night before the explosion, and then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. The photograph trembled in her hand as she walked through the house. Each step echoed like a heartbeat she couldn't calm. When she pushed open the study door, Charles looked up from his desk. He saw the photo before he saw her face, and in that instant, she understood that the stranger had told the truth. Who was he? Charles asked quietly. You tell me, she said. He called me Mrs. King. He rose slowly, every movement controlled, as if bracing for an impact. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Like what? Her voice broke on the edge of disbelief. That you married me. That you buried me alive in your silence. His jaw tightened. I was trying to protect you. From what, Charles? From yourself. For a moment, all that could be heard was the rain against the windows. Then he said it, the confession that splintered everything. From the truth that I destroyed you. He told her about the night of the fire, the argument, the accusation. The jealousy that had festered in him for months, feeding on half-truths, whispered by men who envied what they had. "I thought you were leaving me," he said, voice raw. "I thought there was someone else. I said things I can never take back." He stared at the floor, as though seeing it happen again. The shouting, the slammed door, the roar of the storm outside. "You ran. I followed. And when I found you on the yacht, it was already burning." Samira's hands clenched at her sides. "And you let me believe I was no one." "I let you live," he said fiercely. "You were covered in blood, barely breathing. When they told me you might not survive, I wanted to die beside you. But when you woke, you didn't remember. You looked at me like I was a stranger. And for the first time, I thought maybe that was mercy." He sank into the chair, the weight of guilt folding his body in half. "I should have told you," he whispered. "But I couldn't lose you again, not after knowing I was the reason you vanished." Samira turned away, tears sliding silently down her face. "I trusted you," she said. "Every word, every look, every moment you said I was safe. You built it on a lie." "I built it on love," he said. "The only kind I had left." She laughed, brittle and small. "Love doesn't hide in the dark, Charles. It doesn't decide what I deserve to remember." He stood and reached for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between them felt wider than it had ever been. "Tell me one thing," she said. "Did you ever stop believing I would come back to you?" He met her eyes, storm meeting storm. "Every day," he said. "And every day I hoped anyway." She left the study before he could stop her. The hall stretched endlessly ahead, lined with portraits that no longer looked like strangers. Her fingers brushed the wallpaper, half expecting it to whisper secrets back. When she reached Leo's room, the boy was asleep, clutching his bear. The innocence in his small face hurt more than the truth itself. She sat beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Did you know, little one?" she murmured. "Did your heart know me before I did?" He stirred slightly, whispering in his sleep, "Mama, don't go." Her breath caught. Down the corridor, she heard Charles's footsteps. She didn't turn. "Samira," he said softly, "please." She kissed Leo's hair, then stood. "I need to remember the rest, whether it kills me or not." He nodded slowly, understanding that this time there was no holding her back. Outside, the storm deepened. Samira slipped into the nightcoat, drawn tight against the wind. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to find the place where everything had ended. The marina was almost deserted when she arrived. The water glimmered black under the street lamps. At the far end of the pier, she saw the skeletal remains of a yacht, half sunken, rusted by time. She walked toward it, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles. When her fingers touched the corroded railing, a pulse of memory hit smoke, screaming Charles's voice calling her name. She saw herself throwing open a cabin door, the flames devouring the walls, a small boy trapped inside. Leo's terrified face, the heat searing her lungs, and then Charles pulling her out, shouting words she couldn't hear over the fire. Words that sounded like, "Forgive me." She collapsed to her knees, gasping. The pain wasn't physical. It was the ache of recognition, the missing pieces finally locking into place. Hours later, she returned to the house, soaked and shaking. Charles met her at the door, panic etched into his features. "Where were you?" "I remembered," she said simply. "All of it." He looked at her, terrified. "Then you know why I couldn't tell you." She nodded slowly. "Because you thought the truth would make me hate you." His breath hitched. "Does it?" Samira stepped closer, searching his face, the man who had broken her, saved her, and tried to rewrite her destiny. "I don't know," she said, voice trembling. "But it makes me see you, really see you, and that's worse." They stood in silence as thunder rolled across the sky. Finally, she whispered, "You have to forgive yourself, Charles." He shook his head. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," she said. "But our son does. And I can't raise him in a house full of ghosts." Her words were soft, but they carved through him like glass. "What are you saying? I'm leaving?" For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then he nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "If that's what you need to heal, I won't stop you this time." She took a deep breath. "It isn't what I need. It's what we need to see if love can survive in the light, not in the dark." He reached for her then, but not to hold her back, just to touch her one last time. Their fingers brushed a spark of warmth amid the cold. "I'll wait," he said. She smiled faintly. "You already have." As she turned to leave, lightning illuminated the cracked photograph still on his desk, their wedding picture. The fracture that once divided their faces now ran directly between their joined hands, like a wound finally ready to heal. Outside, the rain began to ease, replaced by the quiet rhythm of water dripping from the eaves. And somewhere beyond the storm, dawn waited, carrying both promise and punishment. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It came down in long silver threads, weaving through the iron gates of the King estate, softening even the sound of footsteps, hers steady but shaking. Samira carried only a small suitcase, but her heart felt heavier than anything she could pack. Each step away from the house felt like tearing a page out of a story she wasn't sure she still belonged to. Behind her, Charles stood beneath the porch light, drenched, though he didn't move. The storm blurred him into shadow, a figure half swallowed by regret. "Samira," he said once quietly. She didn't turn. There were no words left that could stitch them back together, not yet. So he simply watched as the woman he loved disappeared into the rain, her silhouette fading until she was only memory. And when the gate closed behind her, it sounded like the final beat of a heart giving up. Inside, the house seemed to collapse in on itself. Every room echoed differently now, the kitchen too still, the piano too quiet, the air too thin. Leo's cry broke the silence. Charles rushed upstairs, finding his son sitting up in bed, eyes wide and wet. "Daddy, she's gone," the boy sobbed. "Mama's gone again." Charles gathered him into his arms, pressing the child's face to his shoulder. "I know," he whispered, voice cracking. "I know." Leo trembled. "Will she come back?" Charles closed his eyes. Rain drummed against the windows like 1,000 unanswered prayers. "I hope so," he said. But love isn't about keeping Leo. It's about learning to wait. The boy's small arms tightened around his neck, and in that fragile embrace, Charles felt both the weight of loss and the faint, impossible pulse of hope. Someday, he whispered to his son, "You'll understand. Loving someone means learning how to live with what you can't hold." The next morning, the world looked hollow without her. Ellen found him in the study, sleeves rolled, staring at a blank sheet of paper. She paused in the doorway. "You should rest, sir." He didn't answer. Instead, he dipped the pen and began to write. "Dear Samira, if love were fair, I'd ask it to give you peace and take my memory in exchange. But love has never been fair. It only teaches us to endure what it cannot undo." He folded the letter carefully and sealed it. Then another, and another, the next day. He never knew where to send them, but he wrote anyway, as if words could find her when he could not. Each letter carried a piece of him he could no longer say aloud. Apologies, confessions, the echo of laughter they once shared. Sometimes he would imagine her reading them, smiling faintly, forgiving him in silence. Other nights he feared she'd never see a single one. Still, he wrote, because to stop would mean admitting she was truly gone. Far from New York, Samira found herself in a quiet coastal town in Maine, the kind of place where the sea never slept, and every morning smelled of salt and second chances. She rented a small apartment above a flower shop. The walls were thin, the windows drafty, but she could hear the ocean breathing outside. For the first time in months, she could breathe too. Days blurred into one another. She worked at the clinic. She watched the tides. She tried to remember the parts of herself that existed before love and fire and loss. But healing wasn't peace. It was noise, the kind inside your head when you want silence most. At night, she still dreamed of him. Not the man who lied, but the one who whispered her name like it meant forgiveness. She hated that she missed him. And yet she did. Every sunrise that broke across the water reminded her of the way he looked at her, like dawn itself had taken human form. One afternoon, while unpacking an old box the clinic donated, she found a children's book tucked beneath a pile of magazines. The Boy Who Waited for the Wind. Inside the cover in faded ink, someone had written, "For Leo. Love always finds its way home." Her breath caught. She turned the pages slowly, feeling the sting behind her eyes. By the time she reached the last page, she realized she was crying, not because the story was sad, but because it was true. Home, she whispered to the empty room, was never the house. It was us. Meanwhile, in New York, Charles was unraveling in quieter ways. He went to work, attended meetings, signed contracts, all on autopilot. The world still saw the billionaire, polished, composed, untouchable. But behind closed doors, the mask cracked. He stopped sleeping in their room. The piano gathered dust. Even Leo noticed. "Daddy," the boy asked one night, "why do you stare at the door every evening?" Charles smiled faintly. "Because sometimes, if you look long enough, the people you love walk back through." Leo tilted his head. "Is that real?" "It's faith," Charles said. "And faith is what you hold on to when everything else leaves." Every Sunday, he went to the post office and left another letter with the clerk. No return address, no name, just, "To the woman who once saved me." The clerk never asked questions. Maybe he'd seen enough hearts passing through his hands to recognize one still trying to mend itself. Winter came early that year. The first snow dusted the marble lions outside the king residence. Inside, Leo pressed his small hand to the window pane. "Do you think Mama's cold?" Charles knelt beside him. "Wherever she is, she's warm." "How do you know?" He smiled faintly. "Because she's the reason the snow doesn't feel lonely." Leo giggled, and the sound was soft enough to make something inside him ease. Far away on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, Samira stood wrapped in a wool coat, watching the sea. The wind tangled her hair. The waves roared beneath her feet. She closed her eyes. For months she'd tried to silence her heart, but hearts don't forget what they're made of. Hers had been built beside his. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a crumpled letter. The ink was blurred, the edges torn. One of the King Company envelopes Ellen must have slipped into her suitcase before she left. She read it again for the 100th time. "Samira, if you ever remember me, don't remember the man who failed you. Remember the one who still wakes up every day, believing he can earn the right to say your name." Her hands trembled. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to whisper it aloud. His name, and with it came both ache and peace. Charles. That night, as the tide rose, she lit a candle by the window. A single flame in the dark swaying against the wind, a signal she didn't quite understand. But somehow, deep down, she knew he would feel it. And in New York, hundreds of miles away, Charles looked up from his desk at that exact moment, sensing something shift in the quiet. He couldn't explain why, but he walked to the window and smiled. Somewhere in some way, She was remembering him too. Weeks passed. Letters kept coming, though now the words were different. They weren't written from pain, but from longing that had learned how to breathe again. He wrote of Leo's drawings of spring slowly breaking the snow, of small moments that still belonged to her. And even if she never read them, he knew writing them was how he kept her alive. Because sometimes love doesn't return. It just lingers long enough to become part of who we are. But fate was already stirring, quietly, patiently bringing their stories back toward each other. For one evening while closing the clinic, Samira received a small parcel with no sender's name. Inside was a folded letter and a child's crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun. In shaky, uneven letters, it read, "Mama, come home." Her breath hitched. The sea outside seemed to hold its own, waiting for her answer. A year had passed. Chicago in early spring was a city of contradictions. Gray skies over blooming trees, laughter echoing from streets still damp with last night's rain. Samira walked those streets every morning, her white coat brushing against the chill wind, her stethoscope swinging gently as she crossed to the small community clinic she now called home. The building was old, its paint peeling, its waiting room always too full, but she loved it. Here she wasn't a ghost of someone's tragedy. She was a healer again, a woman rebuilding her life one heartbeat at a time. Yet some mornings when sunlight hit the river just right, she'd catch herself pausing, feeling something tug deep inside her chest. Not pain, not quite longing, more like the echo of a song she used to know. The day everything changed began like any other. A line of patients wound through the lobby. She smiled as she always did, listening, comforting, checking blood pressure, giving advice that cost nothing but kindness. And then the nurse called Dr. Johnson. "Your next patient." She turned. A small boy stood by the doorway, a little older now, his curls longer, his smile hesitant, but impossibly familiar. He clutched a drawing in one hand and an envelope in the other. Samira froze. "Hello," she said softly, her voice breaking before she could stop it. The boy's eyes, those same gentle brown eyes she'd seen in her dreams, met hers. "My name is Leo." Her knees went weak. She knelt to his height. "That's a beautiful name." He studied her carefully, as if searching for someone inside her face. "Daddy said you help people remember who they are." The world tilted. "Your daddy." He nodded solemnly and handed her the envelope. "He told me to give you this. He said if I ever found you, I'd know." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. The paper was worn, the ink slightly faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "If you're reading this, it means the universe was kinder than I deserved. It means I still believe in miracles. And you were always mine, Samira, long before memory, beyond forgiveness, beyond time." Her breath caught. A sharp pain bloomed behind her eyes, spreading like light bursting through cracks. Images collided, fire, water, smoke, the scream of tearing metal, the taste of salt and fear. Charles's voice breaking through the chaos. "Don't die, Samira. Please don't leave me again," she gasped, clutching her head. The room spun, collapsing into color and sound and heartbreak. The nurse rushed forward. "Dr. Johnson, are you all right?" But Samira was already somewhere else, inside the memory she'd been missing for so long. She saw it all clearly now. The argument, the yacht, the explosion. Charles dragging her from the wreckage, blood on his face, his arms around her. "I'm sorry," he'd said, over and over, his tears mixing with the rain. "Stay with me, Samira. Please stay." And then the darkness had swallowed her whole. When she came back to herself, her cheeks were wet, her pulse trembling beneath her fingers. Leo was still there, staring at her with wide, uncertain eyes. You remember him now, don't you? He asked quietly. She nodded, unable to speak. Daddy said you'd come back when you were ready. Her heart cracked open. She took his small hands in hers, tears slipping silently down her face. He waited for me. Leo smiled, a simple, radiant thing that looked exactly like Charles's. He never stopped. That night, Samira sat by the lake, the letter beside her, the wind soft against her hair. Chicago's skyline glittered across the water, each reflection trembling like a heartbeat. She thought about all the pieces of herself she'd lost, the woman she had been, the love she'd once believed she'd buried. But memory didn't return to punish her. It returned to remind her that love, no matter how broken, still leaves its light behind. She pulled another sheet of paper from her bag and began to write. Charles, you once said, love is about learning to wait, but maybe love is also about learning to return when the waiting is done. She paused, smiling faintly through tears. I remember everything now. The fire, the fear, the way you held me as if your arms could rewrite fate. You couldn't stop the storm, but you never let go. And that's what I'll remember most. Her pen shook as she signed it simply, Samira. Days passed. She mailed the letter without an address, trusting the same miracle that had brought Leo to her. But something restless had begun inside her, a pulse that wouldn't quiet. Every morning she checked the post office, half afraid, half hopeful. Every night she dreamed of the house on the hill, of Leo's laughter, echoing through empty halls, of Charles's eyes, when he said, "You made me believe in forever." Until one evening she saw a headline on a folded newspaper by the clinic desk. King Industries Charity Gala. A new beginning for the billionaire philanthropist. There it was, a photo of Charles, older, more tired, but still unmistakably him, standing before a banner that read, King Johnson Foundation for Hope. She touched the image, her heart stuttering. He had named it after her. That night, she couldn't stay still. The rain returned, tapping softly against her window, whispering like an old friend. She packed her bag quietly, placed Leo's drawing inside, and locked the clinic door behind her. The train to New York left at dawn. She sat by the window watching the city fade into mist, her reflection flickering between past and present. With every mile she felt lighter and yet more afraid. Because she wasn't going back to the man who broke her. She was going back to the man who waited for her anyway. At that same hour, Charles sat alone in the study, the fireplace dim, the house silent except for the rain. He unfolded one of his old letters, the ones he'd written to her and never sent. The paper had yellowed, but the words still carried the same ache. Maybe love is not what we remember. Maybe it's what refuses to fade even when memory does. He smiled, sadly, closing his eyes. And then, as if conjured by thought, the doorbell rang. He hesitated. No one came this late anymore. When he opened the door, the wind rushed in carrying the scent of rain and sea salt, and there, beneath the porch light, stood Samira. She looked different, older, steadier, but her eyes still held that quiet, luminous fire. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain fell between them, like years collapsing. Then Samira whispered, "I found your letter." He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for an entire year. "And did you find me in it?" Her tears glimmered as she nodded. "I remembered everything." And when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. They stood in the doorway, soaked and silent, the storm curling around them. Somewhere upstairs, Leo stirred in his sleep, as if sensing the shift in the air, the way absence had turned into return, and time itself had finally exhaled. Because sometimes love doesn't need forgiveness. It just needs to be remembered. The ballroom shimmered beneath 100 golden lights. Cameras clicked, voices hushed, and in the center of it all stood Charles King, immaculate in his black tuxedo, the man who had once owned empires, but lost the only thing he couldn't rebuild. Tonight he wasn't here as a billionaire or a headline. He was here as a man who had finally learned what wealth could never buy forgiveness. Behind him, the banner read, King Johnson Foundation, where hope remembers. Every syllable of that name carried a heartbeat, a promise, a resurrection. He looked out at the crowd of donors, press, and partners, but his gaze searched for only one face. She was there, standing near the back of the hall, her dark hair shimmering under the chandelier light, her eyes steady, radiant, and alive. Samira. It had been months since she'd walked back into his life that night in the rain. Months of silence that said more than words could. They had rebuilt slowly. Letters turned to calls. Calls turned to visits. Visits turned to quiet mornings spent together, speaking not of the past, but of the now. And tonight she was here, her first public appearance beside him, not as a wife reborn, but as a woman who chose to stay. The speeches went on. Numbers, goals, the future of the foundation. But Charles barely heard them. His mind pulsed with one thought. There are contracts that bind the body, and there are promises that bind the soul. When the host called his name, he stepped forward, paper in hand. The murmuring stilled. Every light in the hall seemed to lean toward him. Good evening, he began, voice calm, but trembling beneath its own weight. A year ago, this foundation was just an idea, a name that meant something unfinished. Tonight, it becomes something whole. He paused, glancing at the page he held. This, he said, holding it up, is the most important contract I've ever written. The audience chuckled softly, expecting business talk. But then they fell silent as he continued. It's not about stocks or land or legacy. It's about love. The kind that survives even when memory doesn't. The kind that forgives even when reason says it shouldn't. He unfolded the paper slowly, his voice steady. Duration forever. Value priceless. Position Mrs. King. The room fell utterly quiet. For a heartbeat, only the soft hum of the chandeliers filled the space. Then someone gasped. Cameras flashed, and in the back, Samira pressed a hand to her mouth. Her tears came before she could stop them. Charles looked up, finding her through the blur of light. Samira, he said, the microphone forgotten in his hand. I once built empires to feel invincible, but I learned that love isn't about power. It's about surrender. You taught me that. He stepped down from the stage, each footstep echoing against marble. When he reached her, the crowd instinctively parted. He offered the paper to her, not as a grand gesture, but as something quiet, trembling, deeply human. Will you sign this one, Samira? He asked. Not because you forgot our story, but because you remember who we are now. She laughed softly through her tears. I don't need a pen for that. And before the cameras, before the applause, before the breathless awe of a room full of strangers, she wrapped her arms around him. I already did, she whispered. The hall erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes burst like fireworks, but the two of them barely noticed. In that moment, time didn't move. It simply existed, like the pause between heartbeats when you realize you're home. When they finally pulled apart, Samira's eyes met his. You've changed, she said. So have you. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's why it works this time. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Maybe it always would have, if we'd learned to listen sooner. Later on the terrace overlooking the city, the air smelled of champagne and night jasmine. The laughter inside the ballroom faded into distant music. Samira leaned against the railing, the skyline glittering beyond her like a promise. You know, she said quietly, I thought remembering everything would make it harder, but it didn't. Charles turned toward her. Why not? Because I realized memory isn't the proof of love. Choice is. He studied her the way the wind teased her hair, the way she stood no longer fragile, no longer lost. So, you chose me. She smiled. No, Charles. I chose us. He exhaled the tension of years, softening into something peaceful. I'll spend the rest of my life earning that. You already did, she said, slipping her hand into his. Every letter you wrote, every day you waited. They stood there for a long time watching the city breathe. Below them, the banners of the foundation fluttered in the evening breeze. 2 names, side by side. King, Johnson. Not one replacing the other, but 2 halves of something whole. Inside, the orchestra began to play again. Leo ran toward them, his small suit slightly crooked, his smile wide. Mom, Dad, he called, clutching a folded napkin. Charles crouched to meet him. What's that? Leo grinned, showing his missing front tooth. My own contract, Samira laughed. Oh, really? Yep, it says, duration forever, value infinity. Job title, best son. Charles ruffled his hair. Seems like we're all bound for life then. Leo's giggle was the purest sound either of them had ever heard. For a moment, the 3 of them stood together beneath the chandelier's light, no longer haunted by loss, but blessed by what they'd chosen to keep. As the evening drew to a close, Samira found herself alone for a moment by the gallery doors. She looked out at the city and thought about all the versions of herself she had been: wife, stranger, healer, wanderer. Each one had led her here to this moment of stillness. She touched the folded contract still in her hand, smiling through quiet tears. The ink had smudged from his fingers when he'd written it, imperfect, human, real, just like them. From across the room, Charles watched her, her grace, her light, the calm that had once been chaos. He thought of the night she'd left him, of the letters that never reached her, of the boy who had carried one across miles. He thought of everything they had lost and how somehow it had led them back to this. Maybe love wasn't about finding each other again. Maybe it was about becoming the kind of people who could. He smiled. Later, as they left the ballroom, hand in hand, the moon spilled silver across the marble steps. Reporters called their names, cameras flashed, but Samira didn't look back. Instead, she whispered, "What happens after forever?" Charles glanced at her, his voice low. "Then we start again." And together they stepped into the night, no longer the man and woman who had survived tragedy, but the ones who had rewritten it. Because some stories don't end when memory fades. They begin again when love remembers itself. The garden shimmered in late afternoon light. Golden rays poured through the leaves, scattering warmth across the marble terrace of the King estate. Flowers bloomed wildly, roses, hydrangeas, the lavender Samira planted that spring. Their scent drifted through the air like memory reborn. Leo's laughter echoed through the garden. He was chasing a butterfly, his little feet trampling the grass, his curls catching sunlight. Every so often he turned back to make sure his parents were watching, and every time they were. Samira sat on the bench beneath the willow tree, a book open, but unread in her lap. Charles stood beside her, sleeves rolled, eyes soft, with a quiet pride he could never quite put into words. This peace was something he once thought he'd never deserve. He sat beside her. "He's getting faster." She smiled. "He's getting free." He followed her gaze to the boy twirling in the sunlight. "You used to say that love was a kind of home." "I did," she said, turning to him. "But I was wrong. Home isn't where love begins. It's where love stays." For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the soft hum of life, the sound of bees, the flutter of wings, the laughter of a child who had learned that safety could exist. Samira leaned back, closing her eyes. "Sometimes I still wake up, afraid I'll forget again," she murmured. "Not the facts, the feeling." Charles looked at her, every word sinking deep. "What feeling? The one I have right now?" She said softly. "That everything's exactly where it should be." He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the faint scar on her wrist, the only visible reminder of all they'd survived. "If you ever forget," he said gently, "I'll remind you, from the beginning, every chapter, every mistake, until you remember how it felt to be loved." She smiled through the shimmer in her eyes. "You'd tell the whole story again, as many times as it takes," he said. "That's what forever means, doesn't it?" Inside the house, the piano waited in the corner of the living room, the one she hadn't touched since before the fire. That evening after dinner, Leo wandered over and pressed a single key. The note rang clear and hesitant, like the start of something new. Samira joined him, fingers tentative at first, then sure. The melody rose delicate and familiar. Charles stood by the doorway watching as mother and son shared a language that didn't need words. For years, silence had filled this house. Now, music lived here again. Later, when Leo had fallen asleep upstairs, Samira and Charles walked through the garden once more. The night was mild stars hanging low over the horizon. "I used to think healing was about forgetting," Samira said quietly. "But it's not. It's remembering and not breaking apart this time." He nodded, his hand finding hers. "You're stronger than you've ever been." She laughed softly. "We both are, but only because we stopped trying to be perfect." They stopped near the fountain, where the reflection of moonlight rippled like liquid silver. "You know what scares me now," she said. "What? That someday all of this us, this house, this peace will become a story Leo tells when he's grown. And I don't want to just be someone he remembers. I want to be someone he learns from." Charles looked at her for a long moment. "Then teach him what love really looks like. Not the kind that never falters, but the kind that never gives up." Weeks passed. The foundation flourished, their names etched on its walls, not as a monument to wealth, but as a testament to survival. They built schools, funded clinics, gave homes to families who had none. "Every child deserves a place to return to," Samira said during an interview. "Not just a house, but a heart that stays." Her words spread across news outlets and social media, but Charles knew they weren't meant for the world. They were meant for them. One evening, while reviewing reports in his study, Charles found a letter tucked between the pages of a book, her handwriting curved and calm. "Charles Frey used to think our story ended the day I forgot who we were. But I see now it began the day you chose to wait. You turned pain into patience, guilt into grace. And somehow that gave me the space to find my way back. If someday I lose my memories again, don't try to fix me. Just love me as you always have, quietly, stubbornly, faithfully. Because even without memory, the heart remembers the way home." He smiled, folding the letter carefully, placing it against his chest, before tucking it into his drawer. The next morning, the sky broke open into sunlight, the kind that felt like a promise kept. Leo came running into their bedroom holding a drawing he'd made. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, a crooked house behind them, a tree bending in the wind. "This is us," he announced proudly. Samira looked at it and laughed. "Where's this place?" Leo pointed to the heart he'd drawn in the middle of the page. "It's not a place, Mama. It's home." Charles's eyes softened. He pulled the boy onto the bed between them. "You're right, son." Leo grinned. "I know." Samira met Charles's gaze over their child's head. "Smart kid. He gets it from you," he said. "From us," she corrected, smiling. That evening, as the sun sank low, painting the garden in amber, and rose, Samira stood by the window. The air shimmered with the scent of blooming jasmine. Behind her, Charles approached, slipping his arms around her waist. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "Every day," he whispered, "but I'm not afraid of it anymore." She turned to face him, her fingers resting on his chest. "Why not?" "Because I know what stays," he said. "This, you, us." She smiled. "And if I forget?" He brushed a kiss against her forehead. "Then I'll tell you our story again until it becomes new." Her eyes softened. "From the beginning. From the moment I first saw you," he said, "and every moment after." The sun disappeared beyond the trees, leaving streaks of gold in its wake. Leo's laughter drifted from the yard again, pure, unburdened, alive. Samira rested her head against Charles's shoulder, and for the first time, she didn't fear losing anything. Because love, she realized, wasn't about holding on, it was about belonging. And belonging meant choosing the same heart again and again, even when the world changes around you. As night settled, the lights inside the house flickered warm against the glass. Family portraits lined the hallway, old ones, new ones, some slightly crooked but all full of life. In the newest frame, a simple inscription read, "The King Johnson family. Home is not built, it is remembered." Years later, long after Leo had grown and started his own life, people still visited the foundation's gardens, where the lavender always bloomed a little brighter, and a bronze plaque by the fountain carried the words, "Family is not made by blood, but by those patient enough to love us twice." And when the wind moved through the flowers, it sounded like laughter, his deep and hers soft, intertwined forever, telling their story again. Love isn't a miracle that saves us. It's the quiet choice that keeps us human again and again.